Chapter 39, Waking the Great Bear. Lily Weber leaned against the headboard of her bed, trying to make sense of all the fragments of syllables in front of her. Each piece of paper had phonetic symbols upon it, along with simple musical notes and phrases for proper emphasis. Each one also had a piece written upon it, chronicling months of lessons from Nana Conan, pieces of a puzzle. Ignoring the dates, she arranged the slips, trying to find common musical elements within the Song of the Manitou. Finally satisfied, she looked over the bizarre song sung in an unknown language. Thanks to Nanak's coy tutelage, each lesson delivered just a piece of the full score, with no clear beginning or ending declared. Yet she found one section that seemed to overlap into several verses of musical cohesion. Clearing her throat, Lily took in a breath and began releasing notes that just tickled her vocal cords. Her eyes traveled over the 6 pieces of paper, note by note, syllable by syllable, just as Nanak had taught her. The door of the room flew open, causing her to jump with a slight squeal. "It's you," Winnie said with a deep sigh, clutching her chest. "I could not figure out what I was hearing. I got the chills and the hair on my arms stood on end. What is all that?" Lily picked up the pieces of paper in a disorganized shuffle. "Sorry, were you trying to sleep?" "No, I was just sitting by the fire warming my feet." "Were you singing?" "Yes, these are my notes. Grandfather Nanak is teaching me old songs and stories about our people, and then I write them down for Garin." Winnie's brow wrinkled. "Our people? You might be a single coin, but you still have 2 sides. Remember, my ancestors walked these woods when your people were still along the Atlantic. The Sioux." "Can you tell me why the Chippewa call your people snakes?" "Come, sit at the fire with me, and I'll share some of our tales," Winnie said, leading the way back to the fire. Once seated, Winnie propped her feet up toward the fire. "The Sioux call themselves the Ocheti Sakowin, the 7 council fires. We were allies against the dangers in the world. Our enemies called us snakes because we vigorously defended the lands of our territory, which stretched from the Great Lakes all the way to Bear Mountain in the lands of my Blackfeet people." Bear Mountain? It is the stump of a giant tree, the world's first tree. And the great bear tried to destroy our people, who hid atop the stump of the fallen tree. Its claw marks can still be seen. "You mean Devil's Tower in Wyoming?" Winnie smiled and shrugged. "Yes, once again, the words are twisted, like the term Blackfeet. In the days of the dawn, when my people were new to the land, a great fire swept across the prairies, killing everything in its path except for a group of women who were spared by the Creator. When they returned to their village, their feet were filthy from the ash." "You're a long way from your homeland," Lily surmised. "Grandfather told me of the 7 fires of the Anishinaabe, and you describe your people as the 7 council fires. Is there a connection?" "Life is all about perspective. The Sioux are snakes to the people seeking their promised lands, yet we see ourselves as the guardians of the frontier, protecting our lands against the enemies who seek the Unctehi, the horned serpent that lurks in the depths." "What are you guarding? Do you remember the great bear I spoke of just now?" At Lily's nod, her mother smiled. "Besides the creation of Bear Mountain, my mother told me another tale of the great bear, explaining why the Sioux fought until the day she was captured by Chief Sweatingstone. You remember the story behind your namesake? Lake Tawapatakian, the place of the crooked roots. A Blackfoot boy, who was born in the Black Hills, dreamed of the great bear that left the claw marks. He became so obsessed with this ancient evil that the elders in the village realized there was no choice but to let him chase after the monster from legend." "Sounds like McGeesy." When he chuckled. "Yes, boys. This boy, this Wishwe, he left his home and wandered far, facing many obstacles, until finally he came to a place called the Haunted Valley, for hidden deep in the cave of this valley was the sleeping bear, known also as No Soul. What Wishwe did not understand is that No Soul was not an ordinary bear. No Soul was an immortal shapeshifter, capable of taking any terrifying form it chose. Mortal weapons could not harm this evil monster, which is what the spirits warned Wishwe as he was about to enter the cave and face certain death. To defeat No Soul, the spirits told him, you need to find the white egg. I forget how Wishwe managed to acquire the egg, but it helped him defeat No Soul and release all the victims trapped inside the cave with him. My mother told me that the story of Wishwe and No Soul is a tale of the past as well as a tale of the future. Grandfather Nanak said the same thing about the Seven Fires prophecy, Lily mused. You said your people were guardians. Could they have been guarding an island? The one the Chippewa were seeking? I'm not Santee. I'm Blackfoot Lakota. What's the difference? The old alliance is a village. The 7 council fires was made up of my Lakota people in the west, the 2 Yankton tribes upon the plain, and the 4 eastern tribes. Some people call the Santee the Dakota. Others call them Santee, which means people of the knife. But I knew them by the old word Isayanthi, which means guardians of the frontier. The Santee kept our enemies beyond the Mississippi and Great Lakes for generations before their strength finally failed. Whether they protected an island, the white egg, or even the lair of No Soul, it does not matter. My people were broken and their secrets lost. Perhaps it is a good thing you are learning about your Chippewa heritage. I wish I knew more about my people. For a few moments her mother looked sad, as if she were about to cry. Then Winnie wiggled her toes, and Lily did the same. Women of the Blackfeet. Chapter 40. Choosers of the Slain. Martin Nielsen sat upon the frozen lake with a whiskey bottle in his hands. Hearing the approach of a horse upon the ice, he looked down at the bottle and swallowed the last bit of whiskey. With the hoofbeats getting louder, he quickly held the empty bottle over the hole in the ice and dropped it, knocking his cork aside as it bobbed in the hole. With the top of his boot, he pushed it below the surface of the water, allowing it to fill and sink to the bottom of the lake. Please, no more condolences. I'll throw up all over this ice if somebody tries to be nice again. Even in the darkness, the stars illuminated the frozen lake, with the patches free of snow acting like mirrors to the sky. The approaching horse was large, and it came from the east, meaning only one thing: Gustav Forsberg. The door of the old outhouse faced south, toward the southern shore, preventing Martin from seeing how many younger Forsbergs had come with the older Swede. The hooves of the massive plow horse crunched loudly on the trek across the frozen lake, as it neared, Martin could hear humming. He also brought the girls. Sure enough, when the horse neared, he could hear the girls singing "Children of the Heavenly Father" along with their father. When Martin first met Gustav at the Van Slyke Creamery, he cowered when the big Swede barked about cutting in line during morning deliveries. But since that day, he allowed the man the honor of first delivery at the creamery and learned that despite his solemn ways, the man had a tender heart. And now there is no line. At first, the whiskey helped deaden the trauma of seeing Van Slyke's death and the strange misdeed scene. Then the whiskey helped deaden even worse pain. Now it was all gone, but the pain still grew. The heavy hooves halted, the singing ended, and soon Martin heard the passel of children exploring the ice as their father opened up the holes. Gustav's shack stood about 50 yards northwest of Martin's repurposed outhouse. Lantern light suddenly illuminated the outhouse, coming in through the gaps in the boards. In the middle of the winter, a day lasted only until 5 o'clock. Martin heard the crunch of footsteps approaching the fish shack. Living on a farm just a few yards away from the southern shore, Martin walked down in only what he could carry, but thanks to the Forsberg lantern, he could clearly see beyond his cork in the hole. It was Signe who tentatively approached, and then she saw it. Oh my goodness, Britta, Bjorn, come here, you've got to see this." Martin smiled at how Signe reacted to the northern pike he had tossed upon the ice an hour earlier. "It's a monster," Bjorn declared. "Father, you've got to see this. It's bigger than Signe. Look at the teeth." Martin secured his short fishing pole, stood up, and opened the flimsy door to the outhouse. "Did you catch that, Mr. Nielsen?" Signe asked when she saw him emerge. The hole almost wasn't big enough. By the time he tired, I was almost too tired to lift him out. How big do you think he is? Bjorn asked his father, who had just joined him. It must be at least 20 pounds. Well done, Nielsen. Well done. The praise was tempered by a look of concern. I can't do anything right. Therese should come over and show Dolly how to pickle fish. I will say something, but she doesn't like going out in the cold except for church on Sundays. Gustav paused, asking then, How is Dolly? Martin bit his lip. It's been pretty tough on her. Please, no more condolences. Britta's eyes began to well up with tears. Signe looked at him, her father, and her emotional older sister, and rushed up to give Martin a hug, and then a kiss on his cheek. Go kiss Dolly. God knows I can help her. Thank you, Signe. No one mentioned the miscarriage out loud, and the tears remained locked away. Bjorn reappeared with an ice chipper in his hands, oblivious to the moment. Do you mind if I open up some of your old holes? Go right ahead. There's no guarantee there's another big monster holding below the ice. So Bjorn began chipping away, while Gustav led the girls to the large ice house. Alone again, Martin hunched his shoulders against the chill. The recent weather had matched his mood, cold. Each night another few inches of ice grew toward the depth of the lake, just as Martin found his heart hardening to the cruelties of life. But the Forsberg family brought renewed dreams of his own family as he listened to their singing and laughter close by. After an hour, Bjorn finally stopped chipping and began jigging in a series of holes that ranged from Turtle Island to the southern shore. For the next hour, his friend asked him a dozen questions about fishing tactics and techniques before proximity took him out of range. Finally, the lake grew quiet again. Please keep singing, keep asking, it helps. Nielsen stared at the hole, picturing the whiskey bottle at the bottom of the lake, until a strange glow appeared on the ice. At first he flinched, thinking the strange mist had seen him at the creamery, Instead of the yellow colors of the lantern, strange reds and blues flickered upon the ice. Bjorn Forsberg's eyes immediately went to the heavens, forcing Martin to stand and step out of his shelter to look north also. Ah, the Valkyries have come to gather another soul to Valhalla, Martin said as he watched the northern lights begin to flicker. What are Valkyries? Your pa never told you about the old Norse legends? Maybe the old stories died off in Sweden, but my mother still knew most of them, despite being a good church-going Christian. Valkyries are like angels, I suppose, taking souls up to heaven. Those lights are angels? I can't really say what those lights are for certain, but that's what my mother used to tell me. Martin smiled, watching his friend's face fill with wonder. Cooling ice boomed under them, causing Bjorn to look over for a reassurance. It's not going to break, is it? You could drive an entire team of horses with loaded wagons over this ice and it won't as much as buckle. Ice does that from time to time. Good. We were fishing on Saturday afternoon and one of the Berg boys told me there was some sort of monster that lived in the lake. There are no such thing as monsters, Martin said, a little harsh. His thoughts went back to the moments after Stefan Van Slyke was killed in the boiler explosion. It was from shock, my mind playing tricks. So Lake Manitou's not cursed? No, Martin answered quickly. It's just ice. But nothing that happened in the past month supported his denial. Stefan Van Slyke was killed in front of him. The creamery shut down. Dolly miscarried. Maybe it is cursed, Bjorn. A little past 9 o'clock, the Forsberg family packed up and returned home, leaving Martin to his dark thoughts. 20 minutes after the Forsbergs left, the fish returned. Martin saw his cork jiggle once or twice, and then slowly drop just an inch. Gently cranking up his excess line into the reel, Martin waited until he felt the tension on the other line and then set the hook. But the fish didn't budge. With the northern pike, the line almost cut through his gloves when the fish took off, but this fish felt more like a log. Martin kicked the house door open to get better leverage, but he could not pull any harder or risk breaking the line. Come on up and let me at least see you. Could it be a sturgeon? Hand over fist, he brought the dead weight up about 10 or 20 feet. At least show me what you are. And then suddenly the line broke, sending Martin sprawling backwards onto his butt. Before he could even curse, the water within the hole began to bubble like a pot unattended on a stove. A pair of hairy claws came up from the hole, along with a cloud of fog, and then a pair of red eyes fixed on him. The dark torso began to claw and scratch at the ice. It dragged itself closer and closer to where Martin had fallen. Martin rolled over to scramble away from the horror he'd pulled up from the lake, but something clutched at his left ankle. "Get off me," he managed to vocalize, and at the same time he kicked at the strange teacher with his right boot. He missed. A few months earlier, Martin had come upon an angry badger that snapped and snarled and took several of his futile kicks before it ran off. This creature, with its long, black, oily hair, was twice as large as a badger, but when his heel struck the creature, it lifted off the ground, flying into the air with the weight of a balloon. The long fingers of the creature desperately searched for something to grab, but within seconds it flew 100 yards until Martin couldn't even see it. Am I losing my mind? Am I seeing things? He didn't bother picking up his belongings. Quickly walking back toward the shore, he kept his eyes on the ice, hoping not to see the creature come rushing back at him. Chapter 41. The Ironwood Log. Lily Weber felt 1,000 eyes upon her each time she stepped out of her house to walk to Grandfather's cabin. With the arrival of winter, she could now see enough of the emptiness of the forest and the unblemished snow to know she was truly alone and safe. But in her mind, generations of Weejijan Chippewa and Blackfoot Lakota watched her approaching the crossroads of destiny. 3 small snowfalls, without a late-season thaw, left the woods ankle to knee deep in snow, and the normal path became a slow, unsteady trek. Away from the woods, the wind left only a few inches of snow along the open fields. Lily blazed a fresh trail. Once she neared, she saw a cold sweat lodge, a dead fire, and a healthy pillar of smoke rising from Grandfather's chimney. No song today. Despite early December temperatures, the cabin was pleasantly warm, and Lily shed her heavy coat to make her place in front of the stove. A new concept then, since Grandfather always preps me at the stove when introducing something new. After the brief exchanges of pleasantries, Nanak got right to business. He retrieved a large fabric wrapped bundle from his bed and carried it over to her. "I've given you pieces of the Song of the Manitou over the past few months for your protection. Each part contains small spells, but put together, the Song of the Manitou is powerful magic," Nanak warned as he cradled the large bundle in his arms. "Do not ever sing the Song of the Manitou until you are fully prepared to battle the Wintermaker to the death. Is that clear?" Lily swallowed hard. I shouldn't sing it until I have Magisi with me." "Do not sing it until you have the great thunderbird, the water drum, the sacred shell, and what? To defeat the Wintermaker, there must also be I cannot think of the proper word to use. Do you know Omadai? A jar?" Nanak's face wrinkled in thought. "It matters not. One thing at a time. Let me show this to you." He carefully unwrapped the bundle to reveal a wooden container. From the wooden container, he pulled out a leathery tube, which, when unrolled, contained sheets of birch bark with ancient pictographs drawn upon the light surface. "What are they?" Lily asked, her mind absorbing the information. "You know what they are. The sequence." Each pictograph represented a different song she'd learned over the past few months, and Grandfather's random instructional order became obvious. With the pieces of paper on her bed, she'd come close with a few segments, but now she understood how complex the full song would be. Its brilliance also became obvious. It's a list that contains the verses of the song, but none of the lyrics are written down. Oral tradition needs a written code. Only the Ouija know the lyrics. The scroll was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Some pictographs were quite obvious, now that she knew the segment of the song. Others were elusive. She studied it as if preparing for one of Sister Lynch's calculus examinations. Questions? Grandfather asked after several silent minutes. Am I supposed to memorize this like the lyrics of the song? When your training is done, you will not need this. Wait, what is this then? You know what this is, but you do not know where it is found. It's found right in front of me. Nanak smirked. Your brother searched for it and could not find it, but for a good reason. When you are able to find its hiding place, you will be ready to sing the Song of the Manitou and fight the Wintermaker. Her heartstrings plucked a sour note. Ready? I've been practicing since we began. The bundle, with all of its protective layers, took up the space of a man, even though it appeared to be quite light. Does he keep it under the floorboards? Magisi was searching for a cave, just like in the story of No Soul. How did you learn where it is kept? My father told me, and his father told him, for Chief Wiyipisu placed it in his keeping. The words of Manabozho gave you the power to lift heated stones, a clear sign of your powers as a fire handler. While fire handlers are rare, your gift does not make you the fulfillment of prophecy. Is that clear? Yes. Chief Wiyipisu gathered up enough of the song to wake the Wintermaker. But the dark magic he unleashed turned like a serpent and bit him. In his arrogance, he thought his will was greater than that of Manabozho, and without the sacred shell, he tried to use the magic for his own purpose, bringing his death along with his followers. It is said that Manabozho will give visions to the one who will face the Wintermaker, and when it is returned to its resting place, it will remain safe from anyone who knows the truth. He studied her, eyes narrowed. So tell me in your words, why did Wiyipisu fail? He didn't trust Manabozho. He didn't have the sacred shell. You will make a good teacher. You have learned much. Before she could thank him for the compliment, he added, There's still much to learn before your training is complete. Grandfather motioned towards the scroll. Letting Lily look it over for a few more minutes. Why did he warn me when we began? I've already sung some of it. She felt as if a nun had just slapped her knuckles with a ruler. She pushed away her self-pity to study the open scroll with wonder. I wish I could show this to Father Guerin. Much of it looked logical, familiar, except for one section. The spell of protection. When we practiced it, I thought... Did you think the protection was for you? Nanak had introduced it as a spell of protection, but she'd assumed it's been similar to Psalm 23, thinking it would protect her from the valley of the shadows of death. She practiced it the most. No, but before submitting to the grave, the Wintermaker learned his dark arts, including how to bind evil spirits to his will. Takpai, Pukwudgies, Memagwisi, every village has an old woman who tells of the little people of the forest. Forget what you think you know. The Memagwisi trapped these spirits here with him to protect him against... It protects him? Lily was aghast. The spell protects the Wintermaker. This is not a spell to protect the Firehandler, if that's what you were thinking. Is that what you thought? Why didn't he say something first? I assumed... What did I tell you before we began? She bit her lip, unsure of what angered her the most. She was angry at Nana Conan for being so reckless. She was angry at Father Garin for condoning the pagan rituals. She was angry at Migisi for not being here. Why would we even want to wake the little people if they're servants of the Wintermaker? Grandfather remained unfazed. The Takpai Wanakan are slaves of the Wintermaker, bound to him by the magic of the water drum, and their fates are bound to their master's fate. So waking them is a necessary step in waking the Wintermaker. If our enemies come too close, the Takpai Wanakan will wake and defend its sleeping master. Waking them also means they will obey the will of obey the song of the Manitou, giving the Firehandler incredible powers, if they can be controlled. No wonder Mother was so bothered by the song. It was a spell to wake evil. Lily stiffened. Wait, did I wake them by practicing the song? Is something wrong? Nanak asked, looking suspicious. No, Lily shook off her concern. So the parts you've taught me are nowhere near the beginning of the song. When will I learn the opening? For you to learn those verses, you must learn them yourself. Grandfather rolled the birch bark up. Learn them myself? Even though the sacred shell has been lost to us, those who once sang it are not lost. At least not to us. Grandfather paused from packing up the scroll to glance up at a dream catcher hanging from the ceiling. Lily followed his gaze. How will a dream catcher teach me the rest of the song? When Grandmother Spider first taught the people the art of her loom, it was to trap bad dreams, allowing only the good to reach the sleeper. Grandfather smiled. A Jessicate, however, can find hidden truths within the web. Lily thought of the ghost she'd seen in the woods. Uyipisu had been trapped at my window. A dream catcher can capture the memories of the dead? Yes, and there are those who still linger near the waters of Lake Manitou that once knew the full song of the Manitou. He answered. He glanced at a web with tiny pieces of snake tail tied to the loom, looking thoughtful. But to capture these old souls, you will need a powerful net. When spring comes, we will collect young branches from an old willow. At Ghost Hollow, there is a willow tree as old as the earth itself. To learn the full song, we must journey there once the weather warms. Until then, we will not practice. Not giving her a chance to reply, he rose, setting the bundle back on his bed, and reached for the supplies to make dream catchers he had set nearby. Tedious hours passed. When hunger entered their time together, Lily did not immediately follow her tracks back home. Instead, she looked around, trying to figure out where Grandfather would hide the large bundles. After following the foot trails, she found they only led to the cold sweat lodge and a spot between pines where he relieved himself. A secret cave, then? Lily stood near the edge of the ravine, now understanding why Magisi had been in search of a cave. Near Nanak's cabin, the ravine was steep, but to the south, near Lake Manitou, it sloped down to meet the beaches. Staying away from the edge, Lily took a short walk. A hollow implies a depression, and willows grow by rivers and creeks. It must grow near some small inlet. At 7 miles long, Lake Manitou had enough points and bays to have 20 miles of shoreline. Not a quick discovery. At the bluff, however, she stood at one of the tallest points along the shore. Her trek through the snow ended in surprise. At the bottom of the hill, a new bridge spanned the Blue Knife. Although not fully complete, its final form had taken shape. Something whizzed by her head, ricocheting off a nearby pine. By the time Lily understood what was happening, a piece of coal glanced off her shoulder, striking her on the cheek. "Get off my property, you little whore!" A man bellowed at the top of the ridge. Armed with a bucket of coal, Thunderface picked up another piece. She wandered into the white void between property lines, and Adam Thunderface was ready and armed. "I see the smoke from the sweat lodge. I know what you two are doing." Lily ran. Chapter 42, Calm Before the Storm. A blizzard arrived in Hiawatha County shortly before Christmas, trapping its residents for days until the world dug out. Lily watched the snow that had drifted in through the cracks in the mortar begin to melt, leaving little rivers that flowed across the worn pine boards. Even the frost in the windows along the eastern wall of the house began to melt as the morning sun came up over the ravine. She sat in the rocking chair with a heavy buffalo coat embracing her. "When will it stop?" As if sensing her, Winnie said, "This blizzard is nothing compared to the blizzards out on the open plains. And McGeesy is out there on the prairie. He needs to be here. I can't handle this alone anymore." "You said the Morris School has large dormitories and giant stoves. The Sioux learned how to adapt, and McGeesy has the blood of the Sioux flowing in his veins. He will adapt." Her mother's words sounded hollow. She misses him. "I'm just glad you are here with me this winter instead of being at White Earth. You are a good daughter," Lily grunted. "You wouldn't say that if you knew what I've been doing. My sins are piling up, and I have no one to confess them to." The cast-iron stove no longer gave off enough heat to justify sitting in front of it, which made the voice of Lily's full bladder even louder. The rocking chair groaned as she rose, the floorboards creaking when she walked across the room to the corner where she kept the bucket. Hoisting up her dress, she crouched over the bucket, making sure to avoid the cold wood. Once done, she walked the bucket over to the door. A tiny avalanche of snow fell upon the floor as soon as it opened, despite the fact that the path had already been cut in the drift that led to the outhouse. "Mama, I'm going to go out and shovel snow before everything becomes buried again. It's going to be a week before I can do any language lessons. Bring in more coal." "The wind undid all my hard work from yesterday, so it'll be another hour before I can dig the coal shed out." Lily's breath created clouds of crystal in the cold air. By the time she returned from shoveling snow, Winnie had opened a handful of jars and sliced pork, producing a hearty breakfast. "This afternoon I will clear a path to the road. You're not still thinking about going to Split Rock, are you?" Lily did not immediately answer. "Father Guerin should be returning from his trip to Mankato. I need to make sure Kermit can get to us. Beware of all of his sugary promises. This early snow might cool you off in more ways than one." "What's that supposed to mean?" "All you talk about is Father Guerin, Father Guerin, Father Guerin. He's a priest, Lily, and a priest does not take a wife like a midday does." Anger and shame fought for a response. "It's not like that at all." "You are willing to shovel your way all the way to Split Rock to teach him a few words. What am I supposed to make of that?" Her accusation hurt. What did she think of me? "I'm just helping him learn our language and our ways. Sister Inez and Father Haybear are there, along with others, and we do our lessons at the church. You act like we're doing something wrong." "You are Big Squeak's little girl. If someone says something is wrong, he will do it anyways." Then he shrugged. "As soon as you learn something is bad, you want to do it." "It's not like that, Mother. Father Guerin is learning about the Chippewas so his school can teach our culture as well as their culture. And he thinks this is a good idea. Does he understand what kind of man Nana Conan is?" "He does, and I have all sorts of new information to share with him." Which Lily did. 2 days later. Clearing the drive to the reservation had taken less time than clearing the roads around Lake Manitou, but finally they opened, and Kermit Crane was one of the first wagons on the road. Lily found Guerin wrapped in blankets, sniffling and coughing at his desk. "Oh dear, once again it's not just the right time to bring it up. You're sick," she said in greeting as she carefully stepped onto the balcony. "I caught a cold on my trip to Mankato. Like a fool, I went stomping around in this weather as if I were an explorer. Sister Inez brought me soup, though." "Why were you even in Mankato? There aren't any reservations that far south." "Just a haunted valley and a mysterious lake." Scratching an itch. Lily took out her lesson notes and sat across from him. "Scratching an itch?" I've been investigating the investigator of an investigator. Lily sighed, not bothering to respond to that, and flipped through her lesson notes. Joseph Nicollet provided some of the first accurate maps of Minnesota and South Dakota, but after reading his private journals, I realized he had a few obsessions, including Spirit Lake, watersheds, and vitriol. Vitriol? Yes, he seemed to go out of his way to explore a region of Minnesota a few hundred miles south of here, where rivers flow in opposite direction, where a lake produces spiritual healing, and where the earth bleeds blue with copper vitriol. Mankato means blue earth, and Tawapa means lily. Did you visit Lake Tawapa? Garen chuckled. Your namesake? No, the storm cut my trip short, so I did not have time to visit Lure Lake, as it's called now. I'm lucky I even got back. My train was stuck in Belle Plaine for a day until the tracks were cleared. What were you looking for? I wanted to understand Nicolet's obsession. His map of Minnesota left all sorts of clues into his thoughts. Mankato, Blue Earth, Undine, and his many trips to Spirit Lakes made me curious. It turns out he went looking for a place called Fort LaHillier, where a man named LeSueur tried to mine blue earth that he believed to be copper. There isn't any copper at Mankato, only lots of rich farmland. So it was a lie? That's what later explorers determined, yet LeSueur risked his life for something, and Joseph Nicollet risked his life to follow LeSueur. And you risk yours to follow Nicollet? Yes, the blind leading the blind, he smiled before coughing. Yet one of the world's most prominent scientists crisscrossed Blue Earth County numerous times searching for this fictional copper mine. He left words like Mankato, LeSueur, Lahontan, Blue Earth, and Undine all over his map as if trying to draw attention to the myth. Mankato, Blue Earth. So what does Undine mean? Oh, you'll like this one, Lily. Undine is most recently a Germanic legend about a man who gets seduced by a water spirit, who ultimately caused his death. A Manitou? Yes, but it gets better. The older definition of Undine is more than a word for water spirit. It is also one of the four elements in alchemy: earth, air, water, and spirit. An alchemist by the name of Paracelsus used this Germanic word to describe the element of water. Besides all his scientific discoveries, Paracelsus was obsessed with discovering the philosopher's stone. We have the word zinc because of his study of vitriol, which alchemists used as an acronym: Visita Interio Terra Rectificando in Venes Occulte Lapidem. Is that Latin? It is. It translates to visit the interior of the earth. By rectification, thou shalt find the hidden stone. Father Garen smiled proudly, then had to use a hanky for his nose. Are you running a fever? No, it's just a little cold. Avoiding her gaze, Father Garen sorted through his stacks of books until he grabbed one and held it up. This is the private journal of Joseph Nicollet, who recorded his thoughts along with his barometric and astronomical measurements of the upper Mississippi. Listen to what Nicollet wrote. Saturday, August 13th, 1836, Lake Manitou. We had traveled some 100 yards when a path of flowers and a garden of greenery opened before us. The surface of the water was completely concealed by large round leaves of white water lilies crowned with their striking flowers, the size and brilliance of which vie with those of the Grandiflora magnolia. A curtain of green trees bordered the left bank, protecting its jagged shadows across the wide ribbon of green and white. Everyone seemed affected by this pretty landscape. Shagabay himself, in the front of the canoe, was afraid of damaging the flowers, explaining that the roots descended into the depths. He would hold up his paddle, and the other paddlers would do the same, and our galley, at the mercy of the current, would glide lightly over the bed of greenness, leaving unharmed the yellow-white corollas unwinding gently their flexible stems. As we entered into Lake Manitou, Shagabay began to sing, asking that our passage through the field of water lilies be invisible. Garen closed the book, and Lily lowered her head in shame. I'm just a puzzle piece to him. He doesn't even see me sitting in front of him. All he sees is the great-granddaughter of a man he found in a book. What's wrong, Lily? Am I just another clue? Excuse me? You're fixated on lilies. First you go to Mankato, and then you read about my great-grandfather singing about lilies. What am I to you? Hey. How are you doing?
About the same.
Okay. How's your wrist and hip?
No, they feel okay. My hip isn't fine. I literally landed on my right cheek.
Okay.
Good padding back there.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, have a good day.
Yep. He popped up from his chair and rushed over to the table to kneel beside her. He reached out for a moment as if to hug her, only to immediately withdraw. No, Lily, I'm sorry for pressing. I tend to obsess about things. It's what I do. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, honestly. Lily glanced at him from the corner of her eye before nodding. Garen seemed to sense it as well, and with a nod returned to his chair. You're not here to listen to my wild conspiracy theories about water spirits and the Philosopher's Stone, are you? She didn't answer that, asking instead a question of her own. Do you know why Shagabay had them lift the paddles? She didn't give him a chance to answer. He probably thought they would wake the horned serpent that lived in the water. I'm named Lily after the same water lilies that grow by the outlet to this day. I'm embarrassed because it made me feel so real. It's making me feel uncomfortable. I'm sorry. We'll focus on your lesson then. But she didn't reach for her lesson. Instead, the puzzle pieces suddenly aligned in her mind. She asked, Have you come to Lake Manitou in search of the Philosopher's Stone? Chapter 43, Marked at Birth. The ghosts were puppets of the Porcupine Men, Albert Fisher decided. When the lake froze, logging shifted from the water to the wagon, which is far less effective. Strangely enough, the big wheel of the sawmill kept spinning even when the men ice fished on Lake Manitou. From the top floor of the mill, Albert could see everything, including a dead boy. Almost hugging the pockets of his father's jacket, Albert offered only furtive glances to the window, where his inky foes, the Porcupine Men, studied him from the shadows. He chose to keep his eyes on the sinister men surrounding his father. Walter Stewart, Oz Haggard, and Philip Marquette. The only ally he knew in the group was a wiry sawman by the name of Farrell Looning, whose presence was justified by opening up the sawmill after the darkness of evening. Each of the businessmen had St. John tousled Albert's hair after he was introduced, even the men from the east. Only Looning's leathery hand did not touch his head. And in a private moment the young man winked at their shared boredom. After that, Albert studied the young man employed by his father. With a mousy face, Looning appeared to be in his late teens, gaunt from hard labor. I remember seeing him working in the lagoon. Outside the wooden building on the lake, a large frozen pool normally collected the logs during the spring, summer, and fall until it was time to send them into the log chute for processing. Young men risked their lives out on the lagoon, wrangling the massive pine logs, risking drowning or being crushed. Looning must have been lucky. Only the fat older men, the survivors, ran the saws. With his father's back bragging, when his father's bragging took him from the rear of the room to the front of the room overlooking Lake Manitou, Albert peeled away from his side to remain at the window overlooking Split Rock Creek. Stay away from the lake, Albert reminding himself. You don't want to end up like poor Frankie Auerbach. The dead boy was more annoying as a ghost than when he'd been alive. Countless times near Lake Manitou, the creep bullied and intimidated him. None of it worked, of course, and Albert kept his distance. Although sickly, Albert was a voracious reader, and when the ghost of Frankie Auerbach appeared, biology books, not horror stories, protected him from certain danger. Even when his father talked, the ghost of Frankie lingered near the shore. I see you for what you are, Frankie, but I also see the jaws of the monster. Under the forced supervision of his father, Albert walked a tightrope between two worlds. Where his father and the businessman stood, that was on the wrong side of things. The still frozen water beneath the front window of the mill belonged to the ghosts and to the strange new creatures, the porcupine men, he dubbed them. During the Christmas blizzard, they'd all been bold enough to come scratching at his window, whispering their lies in the wind. The real porcupine has a skirt of quills, with a head, shoulders, and spine twice as long, almost like the mane of a lion. In the same way, the creatures also had hair, but it was neither quill nor strand, just an inky darkness that covered them, while their feet and legs could barely be distinguished from their torso. The long arms and even longer fingers appeared humanoid. The haunting eyes were the only thing human on the face that were more of a snout than a nose. The deadly waters of Lake Manitou flickered. There were now 3 porcupine men that called out his name, but Albert had only discovered 2 deaths in the newspaper involving the waters of Lake Manitou. Frankie Auerbach had been the first, followed by Stefan von Slyke, but the third victim had not been written about yet, and he wasn't about to be lured in to wake a fourth. Why don't the adults see them? As father stopped talking about the sawmill, and the proper man began to ask questions, They stepped to the stairs while Fair Looning was walking around to where Albert stood. Looning took a moment to study him. The exhibition is over, Big Al. Looning closed the observation window to the east. Go stand with your father where it's safe. Big Al? The unexpected nickname made him smile, and for a moment, Albert forgot all about the lurking monsters. He took a few steps closer and then turned around to study Looning. Wait, where it's safe? Does he see the porcupine men also? Hesitant, Albert moved next to the men as they huddled at the open window, knowing there was safety in numbers. Ira Douglas, the skinny man, kept talking about pineries, dams, and quarries. Only the bald man took notice when Albert stepped beside his father. There was nothing soft or inquisitive about the bald man's gaze, causing Albert to hug even tighter to his father's side. The man felt as sinister as the porcupine men. A few seconds later, the man's gaze returned, forcing Albert to almost stand beside his father. The conversation came back around, and one of the men mentioned the ogre's name, Halvar Dobie. Now that our bridge is in place, Dobie began, the only thing keeping us from the next phase is the dam, which is progressing even if we've taken some wins and losses. With winter arriving, my attention has been further north, with pineries near Leech Lake. But as soon as things begin to thaw, we'll play one of our 3 cards we've been dealt. Albert braved to look out the window to Lake Manitou. The swirling pool of spirits continued to change since the recent arrival of the porcupine men, with 2 eddies forming unbeknownst to the rest of the world, one centered on Turtle Island and the other at Deadwood Island. The spirits are being herded into 2 camps. Remember patience. the skinny man added. This is not a sprint. This is a sprint, not a marathon. They all chuckled. Does that satisfy everyone? Albert's father asked. Any more questions about my end of the operation? No, you've done well, one of the St. John businessmen answered, and they all began to walk away from the front window and toward the stairs. Albert himself kept safely positioned, but it didn't stop Halvar Dobie's meaty hand from grabbing him by the chin. What is that, a birthmark? Dobie asked. Albert froze, but his father turned to answer. Ah, yes, he's had it since he was born. His hair covers most of it now. You've done this before, huh, kid? Dobie said, chuckling. Maybe we should be asking you the questions. The comment perplexed Albert's father, but Dobie let go of the boy's chin and headed for the stairs. Done what before? Chapter 44. Lily Weber now knew there was something different about her home, even though the rest of Hiawatha County received the warmth of the spring sun. Lake Manitou seemed to hold on to winter for an extra month. The deep ravines kept the snow sheltered and preserved, and the thick ice from a long winter refused to let go of the shore. She stood on the edge of the ravine with her hands on her hips. Below, the melting snow and ice brought the river to life, but all along the slope, months of snowpack remained. So much for searching for the cave. Instead, she walked south for a better view of the lake. After weeks of training, Grandfather Nanak took a break to nurse an abscessed tooth, so she walked right past his cabin. Even though the March sun had removed much of the snow on the open field, the lake was still frozen. Gray ice meant open water soon, and with spring, Lily and Nanak would travel to Jimmy Hollow to harvest new growth from an old willow tree, and then her training would be near completion. Just in time for McGeesy's release. Even though she'd excelled at Sacred Heart, Lily understood how they would manipulate her brother. Sending some of the students home for summer turned into both punishment and incentive. With good behavior, Father Guerin had promised, McGeesy would be allowed to return home for the summer. If he can fake being a fire handler, McGeesy can fake being a civilized Christian. Lily had gathered up her notes, stuffed them into a bag, and prepared herself for the first long walk of spring earlier that morning. If McGeesy does come home at the end of May, I'll need to be ready to show the young Thunderbird all that I know. Do I teach him, or do I let the legends die with Grandfather? She needed to rehearse, and knew better than to do it in the same space as her mother. And she dared not do it at St. Marie's, so she decided to do it the safest place around Lake Manitou, Turtle Island. As Lily approached the island from the north, walking over puddles of water melting upon the thick ice, she could see the green hump of the shell as well as the large rocky head of the small peninsulas that created its arms. Manabozho's Lodge, Grandfather called it, but he did not explain the reference to the island. Unlike her knowledge of the life of Christ, her knowledge of Manabozho and the Medewiwin way remained amateur. Over the past few weeks, she and Father Guerin tried their best to compare the religion to their own. Good and evil became romanticized. In Lily's mind, Manabozho looked like Jesus as he taught the original Anishinaabe the same stories Grandfather told her over the winter. Likewise, her supernatural gifts were the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Holding a hot stone became as rational as St. Peter briefly walking on the water, St. John speaking in tongues, or St. Stephen enduring a painless martyr's death. Her nemesis became a horned serpent that looked like a Renaissance painting of Satan, and the ghosts in Takpai were nothing more than lowly demons worthy of being cast into a herd of pigs. Father Guerin had an answer for everything. She pictured Father Guerin riding somewhere out in the wilderness now. The heroic image made her smile, and when he returned from a recent trip, she would impress him with a completed transcription of the Song of the Manitou. I must be ready to do my part. The shore of Turtle Island was miserable. The head was a 15-foot tall solitary boulder, but the rest of the shore was a defensive wall of small boulders and stone that made transitioning from ice to solid ground awkward and dangerous. Finally, she stood upon the golden blanket of wet pine needles. She paused long enough for her chilled feet to warm before hiking to the highest point upon the turtle shell, a mound of exposed boulders that peeked out from the pines. From her perch, she could get a 360-degree view of the entire lake. Closest to her, she could see the shallow tail of the turtle that connected the island to the main shore. The almost invisible peninsula led to a wooded hill and a simple farmhouse. But on the western slope of the hill, she saw a crease in the world. The crease was filled with trees, and even without leaves, the density of the cut hid the details under the canopy of branches. But the shore, normally hidden by the island, revealed a small stream that deposited snowmelt into Lake Manitou. Jibe Hollow? Lily sat down upon the closest bare rock and bowed her head. What am I supposed to do? Why is this happening to me? She retrieved her cross necklace and recited prayers taught her by Sister Lynch at Sacred Heart and Sister Inez at St. Marie's. Finished, she let go of the cross and let her bare palm rest upon the cold stone, Inyan. The creator god of Lakota, whose corpse could be seen in the ancient stones upon the world, was neither good nor evil, so she turned her thoughts to him as she walked the fine line between Christian and Chippewa. Receiving no answers, her hand found its way to the satchel. The Song of the Manitou was waiting for her. Since she now knew the parts to avoid, especially waking of the tack pie, she focused on another section of the song, a call for help. Clearing her throat, she opened her mouth and barely vocalized the foreign syllables written upon the paper. The phonetic lyrics felt warm, soothing. When McGeesy returned, she'd do her duty, then hide behind her cross, letting him deal with the paradoxical battle for humanity. Granddaughter? The voice ended her song, but she remained as still as the stone she sat upon. Lily closed her eyes, not in fear, but to concentrate. She knew there were ghosts, so when she opened her eyes to the crease of land known as Jibe Hollow, it did not startle her to see a ghost standing in the shadows. Granddaughter? A figure called out from the ravine. I can hear you, but I cannot see you. Lily began walking. Her paternal grandmother, Nannock's wife, had died far up north while birthing a child who would have been an aunt for Lily. Her maternal grandmother, Chief Sweatingstone's slave, died at Leech Lake several years earlier. The ghost is not one of my grandmothers. When Lily reached the near side of the island, she stopped several yards from the shore, keeping a safe distance. I am here. Oh, I thought you were someone else. Will you come closer so I can see you with my own eyes? Lily's heart raced, but the voice did not sound sinister. If you don't mind, I'll stay where it's safe. Yes, the old woman answered. The Takpai can't harm you on the island. You have questions, don't you? Would the Takpai speak of themselves that way? Who are you? You think I am a ghost? I am more alive than you are. Has your grandfather taught you the story of the dream catcher? How does she know? Yes. Yes, of course he has. You are here to save the children in your dreams. You would not have come if you hadn't learned the truth about the dream catcher. the old woman mused. I think I am Grandmother Spider. I am not sure if I have become her, have always been her, or am about to become her. I am your ally in the coming battle. Lily felt as if a teacher stood at her desk with a ruler in hand ready to smack her knuckles. According to Nana Conan, Grandmother Spider was a creator god from the dawn, so the voice did not match up to that of a deity. What can you tell me about the coming battle? Death is coming, and it is all your fault for opening your mouth to sing. You've woken the Tok'pai. There's nothing you can do to stop them now. There is a terrible path to victory, to save the children. If you come closer, I can show you this path. Is this a trick? Is it a demon sensing my guilt? Why don't you come closer to me? Lily countered. Grandmother Spider held the lifeless fronds of the willow, which obscured seeing her better. You know the answer and have already forgotten, but soon, when your heart is shattered into a million pieces, you will understand. But I cannot linger here. I am closing a loop meant to assure both of us. I must again go battle the Wintermaker. What is the most important thing to you? Christ? The old woman cackled in the shadows. Christ will not be in jeopardy in the coming battle. The Wintermaker will take the most precious thing to you. Do you know what it is? The children? Family? Yes, child, I know what is most important to you, but I still cannot help you protect it. Do you still want my help? Protection for my family? Of course. Then you must stand under the willow. Do not worry about ghosts or the Tok'pai. They will fear you more than you know. You are a fire handler who has not yet held fire, but soon you will. She wants me to come closer. Lily turned back to the high promontory where her satchel remained. At the shore at the tail end of the island was much easier to cross. She felt her feet taking her down the slope to the ice. The ice will be thin near the shore. She took tentative steps, but as she neared the halfway point between the island and the skinny bay, she looked up again. Behind the center of the dark flow dividing the show. Shore. Wow. Center. The arms of a great willow tree stood in the creek above the creek bed. That's a terrible sentence. At the center of the shore, the arms of a great willow stood above the creek bed. Although the tangle of branches and the maze of trunks obscured the rest, a narrow window appeared between the rock and the creek. It's enormous, Lily realized, even though the tree was tucked into the ravine. An old woman, with gray braids draped over her shoulders, stood in a floral print dress over her wide hips. Even though the clothing remained a mystery, the old woman was obviously not a creator god. You are so young and beautiful, the old woman said. Your heart is whole. We will wait for you at the cave. But now you must run. Low growls came from the sides, and near the shore, black shadows emerged from the ice, and as they rose, the ice groaned and cracked. Long arms like the legs of a grasshopper emerged from their bodies, and as the dark hands touched the ice, the arms flexed. Lily felt the ice move under her feet, and a wind blew right in her face like the exhalation of a great lion. Run! Her legs obeyed the command, and soon her feet were splashing across the melting ice. Once she cleared the island, she glanced back, only to see the inky demons running after her, the Takpai. The glance caused her to lose her balance, and she spilled onto the wet ice, but only for an instant. She clambered to her feet and ran for home rather than the island. She said I'd be safe on the island, but it was too late. 100 yards from the northern shore, she stopped. A gray wall of figures rose in unison to block her path. No, not ghosts or spirits, a wall of ice. The Takpai were using their magic to push the entire ice shelf away from the southern shore, and now it came crashing into the northern shore. As it piled up, it was crushed by its own weight that turned it into a million ice fragments that grew taller by the second. Help me. Oh, please, God, help me. She saw a solitary figure standing on the hill, Adam Thunderface. He was surrounded by a pile of wood, transfixed, holding a still-raised axe in mid-swing. Lily did not scream for help, nor did she run for the sandy shore, choosing instead to head for the western bank of the Blue Knife. Near the magically created ice wall, she heard the rumble of the annual ice out. At the last second, she jumped onto the shifting heap, surfing the shards up one side and down the other until she found the solid ground of the northern shore under her feet. Chapter 45. Retracing the Steps. Kermit Crane patiently waited for his mother to come tuck him in before he snuck through his bedroom window, crawled onto the roof, and dropped onto the spongy grass beside the house. The boy waited for a few minutes next to the kitchen window until he heard his father's booming voice. His father would normally stay up for another hour, and in that time, Kermit hoped to save himself from a lashing. Somewhere out in the darkness, his father's treasured Barlow jackknife was waiting to be found. Kermit had borrowed it earlier in the day when he went fishing along the banks of Lake Manitou. It wasn't until he returned for supper that he realized he had inexplicably lost the knife that once belonged to his grandfather. So, under the light of the rising full moon, Kermit hustled across the yard to retrace the steps he had walked earlier in the day. The Crane farm was just south of town, just off the intersection of Old Copper Road and the road leading north into St. John. His father was a blacksmith that worked at Sterling Junction, so he easily was able to find the railroad tracks that led out into town. I remember using the Barlow knife to cut the line, Kermit told himself as he walked down the tracks that passed by the lake. His heavy Dacron line had snagged in the water, and unable to break it, he had to cut the line and tie on new tackle. Kermit had been in such a hurry to get himself out of trouble that he hadn't really taken the time to think his plan through completely. Now, as he walked in the darkness, he realized how foolish it was. He shuffled his feet in the rocks between the railroad tracks, hoping that the noise would be enough to scare off anything lurking in the darkness. Normally, Kermit found that little changed about his world when the sun went down. There was nothing scarier about a thing in moonlight than in sunlight, but lately, his brother Monty had been telling of ghosts that lived in the waters of Lake Manitou. As Kermit walked, he tried to dismiss thoughts of beheaded women, serpents in the water, and ghouls that wanted to drag a child into the lake. In truth, he could feel cold spots from time to time as he hustled toward the fishing spot. These cold spots, Monty explained, were the places where murdered Indians fell, only to have their souls sucked into the lake. Idiot, Kermit dismissed with a forced smirk. Where does Monty come up with these stories? On the edge of town, where the railroad veered west around the area, some of the oldest farmers called Assiniconde, or Flat Rock, Kermit followed a worn path made by deer and farm boys that led directly to the shore of Lake Manitou. The Barlow knife was sitting on the large rock where he had set it 4 hours earlier. His relief at seeing it faded quickly. Feeling as if he was being watched, Kermit glanced around before snatching up the knife. His feet echoed loudly on the ground, as if the earth itself was trying to announce his presence to whatever was watching him. The faster he walked, the louder his steps became, until Kermit realized that the sound of his own heart contributed to his betrayal. At the end of the worn path, his pace slowed, but his heart rate quickened as he saw lights where there should only be darkness. He blinked, stopped, and then blinked again. Lanterns? Even if the moon had been new, Kermit would have known exactly where he stood, where the lanterns had been set. In his 10 years, he had passed by Flat Rock more than 100 times, be it from the narrow channel along the lakeshore or by walking the tracks along the west side. Smooth waves of granite, polished by untold years of erosion, poked out of the marshy area that formed the western shore of Lake Manitou. Monty and his friends would play the part of the Union, while Kermit and the younger boys would be forced to play the Confederate side when reenacting the Battle of Gettysburg and other Civil War battles. It was during these battles of Capture the Flag that he had learned every nook and cranny of Flat Rock. Those lanterns are lining the pit, Kermit realized, and even though a cold shudder went down his spine, he could not turn and run toward the safety of the railroad tracks. To him, the pit had been one of the 7 wonders of the world. In Miss White's science class, he had learned the principles of geology, which could not explain how the deep bowl had formed in the field of granite, or how water refused to gather in the bowl despite any cracks or fissures to drain it. Kermit often told himself that when he was an adult, he would answer these mysteries, but now it seemed that other adults had taken up the cause. The flicker of light he saw did not come from the lanterns themselves, but from bodies passing by the torches. Having run over the granite while being chased by Monty gave Kermit confidence in his ability to flee from whatever danger lay ahead. He began to sneak forward. Ducking between mounds of granite, Kermit advanced toward the bowl. All the while, he could almost hear Monty's voice whispering in his ear. What if it is some sort of pagan Indian ritual where they are offering human sacrifices to their gods? No, Kermit told himself. The Indians he had met were much different than the ones in the books he read. Most of them, he knew, even went to church. What if it is some sort of Ku Klux Klan ceremony? Monty's distant voice continued to plant fear in him. What if they are torturing some poor Indian? They will kill you for being a witness. Kermit shook off that possibility, too. Miss White had explained the atrocities of the Klan following the Civil War, but she had also explained that the Klan had been suppressed by lawmakers shortly after the war ended. He stopped when he heard voices. Near the bowl, the rolling mounds of granite were low, and Kermit pressed his face to the cool stone. His own heart pounded so loudly that he felt as if his internal drum would shine a spotlight on his positions in the darkness. He opened the 2-inch blade of the Barlow to soothe his nerves. Gentlemen, I think we're prepared, so you can assume your positions, a voice called out to the small assembly. Conversations continued, including a pair of shadowy figures who stood closest to Kermit. The men spoke in full voices as of standing in front of the post office. It seems as if the stars have aligned. With spring arriving early, the bridge will likely be finished ahead of schedule. The second man sighed. Azero is getting impatient with Morrison and is going to apply a little pressure to get land secured for the dam. Mr. Douglas thinks he found some legal precedent that could get us both plots of land. Soon we'll have our dam, and then everything you see around us will be a massive hole in the ground. Yes. Have you seen Dobie? He's not a fan of ceremonies, is he? Let's take our place. Farther away, Kermit could hear carefully crafted words that almost reminded him of one of Father Hebert's sermons. His fear abruptly turned to curiosity. Surrendering the last secure location for a good look, Kermit rose onto his haunches, and he steadily sidestepped like a frog until he could clearly see the figures standing near the torches. although he could not clearly see any of the faces. His fears were allayed when he saw all of them dressed up in business suits. How odd. The fat man had been speaking, sat at a chair which looked as out of place as the table where the other men now knelt. The third man took the sitting man by the arm and began leading him in circles around 3 candles. He's blindfolded, Kermit realized, seeing then that all 3 men were wearing strange white aprons during the ceremony. Very odd. From the outer edge of the lanterns, a man wearing denim and flannel suddenly interrupted the circling pair and harshly confronted the man. Although the words were deliberate and rehearsed, when Kermit heard the flannel man threaten the blindfolded man, he sat up on his haunches. When the man said "die" and struck the blindfolded man, Kermit took 2 steps backwards. It's a play. This is some sort of performance. A second man stepped into the circle, and this time the argument sounded real, despite the fact that the blindfolded man still had his escort. The second man took the blindfolded man by the lapels of his jacket and shook him harshly. "Grand Master Hiram Abiff, give me the secrets of a master mason, or I'll take your life on the spot." The newest assailant shouted, giving Kermit goosebumps. This could not be happening, not in my town. This is the stuff of pulp fiction books. I need to... The sweet smell of cigar smoke descended upon him with more terror than any ghost or ghoul could have. The supernatural did not find young Kermit. Instead, it was a hand of steel upon his shoulder that reached out from the darkness. "What have..." A man's voice began and abruptly stopped when the Barlow knife punched him in the belly. In that moment of hot blood upon his fingers, Kermit could briefly see the man's face and bald head illuminated by the cigar, which tumbled from his mouth with a groan. Kermit had never ran as he had never run before. His feet floated over stone and then tarred timber, and finally the fields of home. He gave no thought to silently entering through the window, and instead burst the front door of his house, causing his mother to scream in alarm. His father still sat at the rocking chair, and Kermit threw himself at his feet, clinging to him in absolute subjection. "There's blood on him," his mother said, voice shrill. "Why is there blood on him?" His father reached down to collect the Barlow knife that had clattered on the floor. "What happened, Kermit?" He clung tightly to his father's legs and began to sob uncontrollably. "Was it the Manitou?" Monty asked, coming into the room. He sounded so sincere that Kermit began to doubt everything he had seen. Could it be true? Had the monster from the legend simply taken the shape of humans? "Be reasonable, Monty. There's no such thing." His father pulled Kermit up by the shoulders to look him in the eyes. "Where did the blood come from, Kermit?" Chapter 46, Last Stand. As soon as the church bells finished ringing, Lily prepared herself. The congregation began singing, and she ascended for the balcony, discreetly slipping into a vacant pew and joining the song. While her lips sang one song, her mind thought of another, and her ability to focus caused her to clench her hands and lower her head in frustration. What have I done? God forgive me. With Nanak still sick and Father Guerin away, Lily bottled up her terror and wore a brave face, first for her mother, and now for the congregation of St. Marie's. When the last song played, she stood and retreated to the schoolroom. Just a few minutes into the lesson, she came to a realization about the children. They were subdued. Just like she went through the motions as Sister Inez, assistant to Sister Inez, they played their parts, yet seemed distracted. Lily saw it in their eyes, like in the days following the death of Frankie Auerbach. They are hiding something. Each time Sister Inez asked a question or began a new assignment, the secret slipped below the surface. The absences of 2 boys, Kermit Crane and Albert Fisher, made the remaining children more introverted. Finally, after the end of the lesson, Bjorn Forsberg broke the stupor of routine to linger at the doorway. "Miss Lily?" Lily stood beside Sister Inez, who paid no attention to the boy. Hope this isn't what I think it is. Yes, Bjorn? My father asked me if I could pick up some calving supplies this afternoon at the dairy farm west of Nimrod Crossing. I don't know your plans, but if you need a ride home, I'll be going right past your home. Is this his way of courting me? The offer didn't feel like an answer to her prayers, though. When would you be leaving? Soon, right after lunch. Seeing there were no smiles or longing eyes, she nodded. Thank you, Bjorn. I'd appreciate it. Give me half an hour and I'll pull the wagon around to the front of the church. If it was Bjorn Forsberg's way of courting, he did a poor job of it. With Samuel Thunderface, his intentions had been obvious with each move he made. With Father Garin, his smile and kind eyes indicated one thing, but his words and actions were quite opposite. But Bjorn treated her like an extra sack of potatoes, and once she was sitting next to him on the wagon bench, he kept his eyes on the road and the horses. Finally, as they neared Lyons, Bjorn found his voice. What's this all about? She looked up, biting back a yawn. Oh, yeah, she said, seeing the camp of tarp tents on the hill adjacent to Lyons. All these workers showed up yesterday to finish the road and bridge. Nobody's going to visit Nimrod anymore, Bjorn mused. In a few weeks, I'll be able to just cut across to St. John. And then he grew silent again. Lily tried to picture a life with Bjorn Forsberg, wife of a dairy farmer. She'd have a house, a nice kitchen, a social status, but at the price of a lifetime without any meaningful conversation. Suddenly, Bjorn's hand shot up to point. Do you see that? See what? 2 ravens chase an owl out of the ravine and into the woods east of Nimrod Road. I guess I missed it. I probably shouldn't be saying this on a Sunday, he began, but ravens are Odin's messengers, Hunin and Munin. Pardon me? Their names, Hunin and Munin. They'd fly all over Midgard, bringing back news to Odin. Seeing them made me think of the old stories. Well, that is interesting. Grandfather said owls are evil birds. Our word for them is guku-ku. Sounds like an owl hoot, Bjorn commented, smiling with teeth yellowed by plaque. Plague? Plaque? She looked down in a panic. You don't have to drop me off at my house, she said at the table. It's a nice spring day. I don't mind walking the rest of the way. It's no trouble, honestly. It's fine, she insisted, jumping up from her seat. Thanks again, Bjorn. Have a nice day, he called as he passed her. Don't panic. He was just being nice. Lily glanced up, seeing some smoke in the air above her house, a sign her mother returned and was already baking. Lily's ambitions would have to wait, but by mid-morning she'd be exploring the ravine. The cave must be somewhere along the eastern shore. The fragments of 3 conversations gave her a starting point. She mulled over everything she knew as she walked. She'd overheard Nanak telling Father Garin about hiding the entrance to a cave. Then there was McGeesy's efforts to find said cave. Finally, her father had even mentioned finding a cave. Grandfather does not keep the scrolls in his cabin, but how does he access them without giving away the location of the secret cave? A strange squeal caught her ear, and she stopped mid-step. Her head pivoted, and she saw a far more sinister column of smoke. Is that smoke from Nanak's cabin? Instead of an orderly pillar coming from his chimney, great puffs of smoke entered the clean blue sky. Before she could even process the clues, her mother's screams filled the air. The front door of her own home was open. A roar overlapped more screams until a muffled thud brought silence. Tentatively, Lily took a few steps forward. Mother? Adam Thunderface filled the doorway, holding an axe and covered in blood. Lily dropped her belongings on a gasp of surprise. Run! Run! Bjorn and the wagon were already out of sight, yet it was impossible to outrun the ogre to the end of the road, let alone all the way to Nimrod Crossing. Run! Remembering how clumsy he'd been in the snow, she ran from the road and into the uneven field. Her only chance to live would be getting to the little tent camp created by the team of engineers working on their new road and bridge. I'm dead. They veered off the road out onto the open field, while Lily ran over the clods of mud from the recently plowed field. Plowed? Adam Thunderface's feet twisted and stumbled. She could even see the distant tents and small figures of men staring at the burning cabin in the distance. She wanted to scream, but knew she needed every breath and every bit of energy to run. From behind, the ferocity of breathing taunted her, and it took every bit of her focus not to lose courage and veer off to the side. She risked a glance back. Adam Thunderface was only 20 yards away, approaching fast. He hurled the axe, but it sailed over her head by 3 feet. She stopped, frozen in terror. From the corner of her eye, she watched Adam Thunderface, off balance from the throw, collapsing in the dirt. Run! Lily hesitated too long. She had only taken a few steps before a knife whizzed by her head and landed in the ground in front of her. Run! Help, Lily managed to call out through the heavy breathing. Help, she shouted a little louder. Then the adrenaline kicked in and a scream ripped through her lungs. Men were pointing in her direction, moving towards her. Help, please help. She could see the wide eyes as she approached, frail men with pressed shirts and suspenders. None of them were armed. She ran past. Lily cleared the third tent and saw a man with a revolver and fell at his feet. Save me, save me. Another man appeared with shaving cream on half his face. He stopped to stand above her. What happened, darling? A single pistol shot fired, followed by 2 more. Chapter 47. Guardian of the Frontier. Bjorn Forsberg sat on the second-floor balcony, connected to Britta's bedroom with his rifle on his lap. Who'd want to hurt Lily? The house was boarded up, with a shotgun in the kitchen with his mother and the girls. The northern side of the house was his only blind spot, but from his balcony perch, he could see 3 sides from a safe distance. Winnie Weber's blood, Bjorn realized as he studied his hands. He'd heard screams over the wagon wheels, and turning around, he found Lyons, the workers' camp, and Turtle Island Reservation in complete chaos. Old Nana Conan and Winnie had been murdered by the Loose Goose bartender without warning or provocation. Although Lily escaped the attack, Adam Thunderface vanished moments later, and a manhunt immediately began. Bjorn helped tend to the dead while adults tended to Lily's grief. I should have comforted her. She didn't even know those men. Today the church bells had called away his father right after morning milking. Bjorn spent the time wondering what he'd be feeling if his parents and sisters were all gone. Finally, his father rode up on Sleipnir. Bjorn stood on the eastern railing, watching his father go from the barn. Gus Forsberg called to him, stopping in the yard. He killed the Bordeaux dog. Bjorn's lip parted to ask a question, but nothing came out. He didn't flee north. He's near. Martin Nielsen saw crows this morning and found the dog near Canaranzi Creek. There's a theory he's going south on the Crow Wing River, so Constable Graham is gathering a search party to cut him off before he reaches Staples. When Marshal Morrison arrives, we're going to form a search party to sweep the lake. Why did he do it? Folks think it's some old Indian feud, but now that he's killed the dog, it's obvious the man has lost his mind. I don't care about the dog. How's Miss Weber? His father shook his head. I didn't hear anything about that. The constable from St. John is organizing men at the reservation, so she's got a small army protecting her. They're going to be searching the Blue Knife River. He paused, looking weary. I'm going to get the girls situated in the root cellar, and then you and I are going to have a look around the property. Agreed? Bjorn nodded, stealing a glance south. Less than a mile from Old Copper Road, the Boar-Dog dog had been discovered. At first, it terrified and angered him to know the killer lurked near his house. But then he realized Thunderface might be lingering for another shot at Lily. By the time he got to the backyard, his mother stood in the opening of the root cellar, shotgun in hand. We'll be back in less than an hour, his father promised. I need to know he's not hiding on our property before I join the search party. Bjorn followed fast as his father walked away so that his mother couldn't stop him from joining. They followed the trail north through the woods until they came to the woods at Bleeding Rock. They came out of the woods at Bleeding Rock. That makes more sense. Bjorn felt his pocket for more .22 shell bullets, knowing his father's Winchester had been loaded to capacity. Although spooky, the woods around Bleeding Rock held few places for a man of Adam's Thunderface's size to hide, and once they searched it, they headed to the steep cliffs. I want you to just sit here, looking down at the channel between us and Deadwood Island. I'm going to start searching around the north shore, so you watch for him to bolt south. If you see anything, fire a shot in the air and I'll know what's going on. Understand? Bjorn nodded. And once his father continued, he lay down on his belly with the barrel of the .22 hanging over the cliff edge. Stretching before him were miles of shoreline. He stoically studied the gusting winds that turned the lake into a frothy soup of whitecaps. Although Turtle Island covered... That's where I'd hide. With the Blue Knife River 3 miles away, Adam Thunderface could have hidden anywhere, but Bjorn's instincts and patience paid off after sitting on the cliff's edge for 20 minutes. Got you. From a brush pile, the limping killer emerged, dragging a small rowboat. Clinging to the bow of the boat, Adam Thunderface pulled it from behind him until he reached the soft mud of the shore. In a matter of seconds, the rowboat was spun around, and he began plowing through the waves with powerful strokes of the oars. Seeing the boat angling toward the outlet of Canaranzi Creek, where the McPherson boys guarded their farm, Bjorn took aim. In a matter of seconds, he had the view of the man's back. He had dropped a deer at such a distance, and with each dip of the oar, the killer grew larger in his sights. But Bjorn couldn't pull the trigger. His breathing became so labored that the tip of the rifle barrel began to fluctuate up and down. Even though his friends and family were in mortal danger because of the man, he could not bring himself to take a life. Adam Thunderface paused mid-stroke when a piece of his boat flipped into the air like a wooden grasshopper. 3 seconds later, another piece of wood flipped from his boat. Bjorn steadied his breathing and aimed lower. The third shot hit right at the waterline. The fourth shot struck with a splash of water. This time, Adam Thunderface looked up at the cliff right before Bjorn pumped another bullet into the chamber and took aim again. A primal scream, stranger than frustration or anger, echoed across the water, but not before Adam Thunderface turned his sinking vessel back toward the island. He didn't even sound human. Could it be rabies? A few moments later, his father came running, Winchester in hand, and joined the chorus of bullets, ruining the killer's plan of escaping down the Crowing River. By the time Adam Thunderface reached the shore, Bjorn had to open the chamber of his rifle and fumble through his pockets, full of bullets, to reload, allowing the killer to run into the brush. "He's not going anywhere now," his father said moments later, appearing at his side and patting Bjorn on the back. "You did well to keep him on the island." 3 horses came running along the southern shore. The McPhersons had heard the shooting. Within the hour, the scattered posse swarmed to take position. Adult riflemen situated themselves along the granite ridge, while the men from Split Rock obtained 3 rowboats from Berg, Nielsen, and Bordeaux farms. All 3, weighed down with 6 men each, plowed through the rough waters of Lake Manitou. Having helped Martin Nielsen get a rowboat, Bjorn found himself suddenly part of the armed posse paddling to the island. In an adjacent boat, Bushy Bill Morrison studied Deadwood Island before he called out, "That Indian could have a rifle for all we know." Before anyone could reply, a wave turned Marshal Morrison's rowboat, and a moment later, a second wave capsized it. "Damn it all," Martin Nielsen muttered, and without being told, he turned his boat to go rescue the men from the chilly water. 4 figures were clambering at the side of the overturned boat, but Marshal Morrison appeared to be struggling mightily in the water. "Something's got my foot," Morrison shouted. Bjorn looked into the depths for danger. He knew the stories of Lake Manitou and had grown up learning the stories from Norse mythology and the legendary Midgard serpent battling Thor upon the water. Terror gripped his heart. Just before Nielsen's rowboat pulled up next to the wreck, Morrison disappeared. Something's got a hold of him. Instead of jumping in after Morrison, Nielsen took a long oar and shoved it in the water where Morrison had disappeared. He stirred it until something struck something solid. Bjorn leaned close to the water, a few feet below the water. Morrison clutched hold of the oar. Hand over hand, Nielsen pulled the oar out of the water, but just as Morrison's hand reached the surface, the wooden oar was pulled back down a foot. Martin Nielsen's eyes met with Bjorn's and widened with terror. "Good, maybe Morrison will be eaten alive." "Hold on to my belt," Nielsen yelled to the others, and this time, as he pulled the oar up, he precariously leaned over the edge of the boat. "Nielsen, you'll capsize us," Bordeaux shouted. But Nielsen, with one hand on the oar, grabbed onto the water deep enough that his face broke the surface. Bjorn moved closer, ready to grab him, as the others kept the boat balanced. He saw Nielsen's left hand grabbing hold of Morrison's hand. "Be careful. Don't let it get you." A moment later, Morrison was hauled into the boat and ended up across Bjorn's lap. Distracted, Bjorn ignored the terrified lawman and kept his gaze in the water, looking for a clear view of a tentacle or toothy mouth. "There's no such thing. Grow up." A groan had him looking towards the shore, where the 3rd rowboat breached, and the men quickly spread out to scour it. "He's not breathing," one of the men beside Bjorn snapped. "Maybe we should." Suddenly, Morrison vomited into the belly of the boat and began violently coughing. "He's not looking so high and mighty now. Does he remember me?" "Grab a hold of the edge of the boat," Nielsen said to the other men in the water. "We'll drag you all to shore." With clenched jaw, Nielsen fought against the wind and the drag to head for the shore. "Something grabbed me by the ankle," Morrison whispered to Bjorn, wide-eyed. Bjorn glanced at Nielsen, who remained stoic despite the terrifying story he'd told weeks earlier about a monster he saw while ice fishing. "Probably just a sunken tree," Bordeaux offered. "There's probably current flowing around the island," someone else added. Bill Morrison, with his hair flopping in his face and a big mustache drooping limply at the corner of his mouth, shook his head. "No, it brushed past me, circled me twice, and then tried to drag me to the bottom of the lake. It... Is it true? Is there a monster in the waters? Is that why I've been having such terrible dreams?" A scream filled the air. A moment later, gunshots followed. Adam Thunderface came out of the brush stumbling, bleeding from multiple wounds, yet his legs kept moving. 2 more bullets hit home, and he dropped the bloody axe. But he kept charging. Men followed out of the brush, taking aim and firing. Finally, the killer fell just a few yards in front of Bjorn. As blood spurted from the man's wounds, his body also leaked a strange, dark substance that separated itself from the red liquid and slithered for the protection of darkness. That's not normal. Bjorn had slaughtered animals before. The blood looks almost alive. Morrison continued to cough and wheeze, drawing Bjorn's attention away from the slain giant. "Did you see it pulling me down?" Morrison asked with desperate eyes. Bjorn had seen enough, which is why he turned to Nielsen, who cautioned him with a slight shake of his head. "It was probably just a tree branch. What else could have done that?" Nielsen, who had managed to get a dozen yards from the boat, smirked and shook his head. "I'd keep those thoughts to yourself, or people in Hiawatha County might think you've gone loony." A few moments later, men hauled the body of Jonas Penny onto the shore and laid it in the sand beside the bullet-riddled body of Adam Thunderface. Bjorn felt a knot forming in his belly from the gruesome deaths of both men. Before he could be consumed by the moment, Morrison vomited a second time into the bottom of the boat. After wiping the mucus from his mouth, he turned to Bjorn. "You saw it, didn't you, kid? I know you saw it." Bjorn gave a slight nod, even though he'd only seen the struggle. Whatever it was, there are 4 more souls whose blood now are part of Lake Manitou. Like a pilotfish cleaning the teeth of a great white shark, Farrell Looning waited for the monster's mouth to open. The roar was deafening as mighty logs from the northern pine fields were torn to pieces in front of his eyes. Every 2 hours, when men working the saws took a break, he would step in with Walter Core to remove and sharpen the blades. Having already sharpened the blades on the first floor, Farrell now waited at the second-story window for the whistle to blow. It was quite apparent that spring had arrived, and he almost envied the younger men out on the log pond today. When he started at the Fisher sawmill, he too had put in his time out on Lake Manitou, wrangling the logs into the chutes. Now, after risking life and limb during his teen years, he enjoyed the safe life of a saw filer. The 10 o'clock whistle sounded, and the whirl of belts and blades softened as the saws were temporarily shifted into neutral to allow the sawmen a quick break and the filers a few minutes at the blades. George Fisher insisted that his filers rotated to different saws throughout their shift so that there were 8 set of eyes upon them instead of the same 2 all day long, which contented Farrell, who found that each blade almost had its own personality. Abigail, as he called her, was the foreblade on the second floor, which allowed him a scenic view of the lake behind him. He and Walter quickly found their rhythm on the files, while the men who pushed the logs to the building sipped from their jugs and grabbed a quick bite to eat. There had been 5 deaths during his time at the mill, which kept both sets of workers subdued during the break. Occasionally, there were some young bucks who wanted to chat with the veteran filers, but they usually took the hint to leave them alone after a few shifts. Compared to the big teeth of Evangeline and Rosemary downstairs, Abigail's teeth responded quickly to his file. The large timbers were cut downstairs, while the smaller timbers were cut upstairs. All of them were sent down the chute to the finishing wagons that ran parallel to the growing river. Walter no longer spoke, but simply nodded with a grunt as he slipped Abigail back onto her pulley. Almost finished. Farrell closed the doors of the blade house moments before the whistle sounded again, and the building roared back to life. Taking just a moment to catch their breath after such intense work, he and Walter walked down the room until they reached Elizabeth. It would be another hour and 45 minutes before they would get a chance at old Betsy's teeth, and while he waited, they performed basic maintenance on the peripheral equipment while men and logs passed them by. The predictability of the routine became almost soothing after a while, so when George Fisher led a group of businessmen through the mill, it startled him. As you can see, the mill itself sits over Split Rock Creek. George said as they led the men to the window that looked east. The stone banks made it easy to secure the mill a safe distance from above the water, and despite being so narrow, Split Rock Creek almost has as much water flow as the Crow Wing River. So the Nicollet Dam will ensure a steady flow of water through the mill? The fat man asked. The fat man must be the big boss, Looning assumed, recognizing the other men from an earlier visit. It will, which is why I feel the funding of this project is so important. Not only will it help with the logging on the Blue Knife, but it will help regulate water levels in the lake. George Fisher waved at someone below the window and said something that caused them to chuckle. One of the men, the stocky bald man, did not chuckle but grimaced, sweat beading on his head. Is he injured? The fat man with the brown mutton chops frowned, asking, have you considered switching from water-powered saws to steam-powered saws? That's what they're doing throughout New York State. I have, Mr. Gunn, but there's a certain degree of danger and unpredictability to boilers. A short time ago, there was an explosion at the local creamery. Your investment in the Nicollet Dam will provide a safer working environment for everyone here at the mill. A moment later, the procession returned down the staircase, just as it had done before. What do you suppose that was all about? Walter Corr asked as he watched the men leave. Rich men carving up the world. That's the group of Triton businessmen I told you about. I guess George must be trying to impress the big investor. You figure that's the reason why we put on a coat of paint last fall? I would bet you're right. Both men wandered to the window overlooking Split Rock Creek. The mystery of the wave became important when Looning spotted young Albert Fisher standing along the rocks overlooking the creek. On several occasions, George had brought his heir with him. Looning gasped as he saw the boy slip on the wet granite and slide right into the roaring waters of the creek. His fingers gripped the open window, and for a second, his body weight leaned toward the door leading to the hall. But the boy had already been swept 10 yards down the frothing, icy gauntlet. There was no help in sight. Not even Walter had seen young Albert slip into the raging creek. The boy is going to die. His body shifted in motion like the gears, pulleys, and belts of the building that surrounded him. In one fluid act, he lifted his legs over the window and dropped 2 stories into the creek below. In his first year at the Fisher sawmill, the 13-year-old Farrell had leaned out onto the log pond to wrangle a stubborn log, only to lose his footing and fall over the log and into the water. That was when he learned the truth about the Manitou. Trapped below the logs, unable to find a seam in the floating prison, Farrell faced certain death. But it wasn't the million cold needles prickling his flesh, nor was the pressure in his lungs burning for release. It was the voice in his mind that terrified him. It knew me. Somewhere below him, somewhere deeper than the lake floor itself, he felt a malevolent presence reaching up for him like an invisible tentacle, trying to pull his soul from his body. It felt as if it had been watching all those years and waited for the right moment to strike. But then the timber parted, and the men hauled him out of the water like a load of cod. 5 years later, and once again in the frigid waters of Lake Manitou, Looning felt the hand of death upon him. Even though he was officially an adult, his body was tossed around like a doll in the boiling water of the creek. But years of working in the mill had given him arms of steel, and he willed himself to swim through the current. He felt a boulder brush against his shoulder, and a moment later, he found enough leverage to lift his head out of the water for a breath and for vantage. He could see Albert's blue jacket just 10 yards ahead, so he threw himself into the blender. Although the current battered him and the blows to his body actually helped keep his head above the surface, with enough fleeting glimpses to close in on the boy. His hand brushed by the boy's leg. A moment later, a strong hand gripped an arm. Reaching for the boy, though, almost killed him. The boy's weight created drag within the current, pulling him from the surface. He tucked the boy into his left arm and frantically flailed with his right. Twice his hand brushed against stone, but his cold fingers could not latch on. Finally, his nails gripped stone and firmly anchored the full weight of the buoying current. Tried to rip his arm out of the socket, but Looting refused to let the lake waters claim either of them. He pulled the boy's head above water with the kid, but the kid was unresponsive. For a moment, he just cradled the granite outcropping until he heard voices. Hands reached down to the water and pulled the boy from his grasp. Suddenly free, Looting was almost swept away by the current. His hands clawed at his wrists, and soon he was being hauled over the sharp edges of stone. 24 frantic men suddenly surrounded him, cutting off the warmth of the sun, and beamed down at him. A hollow thumping pattern ended with a coughing and vomit of water. Albert lived. "Bloody hell, is that his bone?" one of the men asked. It wasn't until Farrell looked down that he realized they were talking about the white root sticking out of his thigh. "Somebody call a doctor." The water whispered to him again, but in defeat and agitation. He'd saved the boy. He'd saved himself. Farrell didn't care about the cost. As long as he didn't die in the water, things would be tolerable.